right, the clock has struck noon. I'm going to put the agenda in the chat for everybody. I'm seeing people introducing themselves. That's great. I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Colleen Stewart. I'm the communications coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. This is our February network cafe, wasting less food in New Hampshire. This cafe is part of a larger series that we run every year. We have a monthly conversation, discussion, networking opportunity for all the folks in our food system to talk about a certain topic that we want to discuss and want to get more educated on. So that is why you're here today. Just a few things before we get into the meat of it. Just a little bit about us as the Food Alliance. We're a statewide network that engages and connects people dedicated to growing a thriving, fair, and sustainable local food system here in New Hampshire. We are a part of the University of New Hampshire Sustainability Institute, and that's where we're housed. And I want to run a little bit through some of our diversity and equity and inclusion values. We feel that they are strictly linked to achieving our core educational mission and embrace the many characteristics of our community members that make everyone unique to themselves. And as a land grant in university, we acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the Pennacook, Abenaki, Wabanaki peoples have maintained to Indokina, our homeland, which the UNH community is honored to serve today. A couple things pointing to the agenda. Just wanted to take a look at our desired outcomes there. As I said, we're going to be talking about diverting food out of our landfills today. That's going to be the topic of conversation. Learning a little bit about New Hampshire Solid Waste Working Group and some of the legislation that's currently being heard by our legislature. And then we're going to do some networking time to share and learn together. Definitely take a look at our community agreement, which is also linked in our agenda, just to understand what is expected of us as we learn here together today. And feel free to use the chat as much as you can. Introduce yourself, comment, ask questions. We will definitely be addressing things as they pop up in there. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Nicole. She's going to give us some framing and then introduce our presenters for the day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Nicole Cardwell. I'm the program director for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. And before I do my very short Food Waste 101, I want to give a quick plug to save the date for the 2023 New Hampshire Food System statewide gathering on May 11th, and that we just opened up for sponsorship. So if you are at work for or own an organization that sponsors things like that, check out the website for more information. And now I will stay on agenda. So we're here to talk about food waste, and I wanted to just give a little framing before we dive into New Hampshire and some things happening in the state. And so the pieces that I think are really important at a high level are that we're wasting a lot of food in our country, which is also a waste of the natural resources that used to grow that food and process and transport and clean up after that food. And we're doing that, we're wasting all that food while 1 in 6 Americans are going hungry. And wasting all of that food is not good economically for anyone. It's not good for farmers, for retailers, for distributors, for households. And we're talking about it today as part of this Network Cafe series because we're focusing this year's Network Cafe series on climate resilience and building a climate resilient food system in New Hampshire. And when you waste food, you waste all the energy and associated greenhouse gas emissions used to grow, transport, and cook that food. But also when organic matter like food goes into a landfill, an anaerobic environment without oxygen, when it decomposes, it emits methane gas, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, about 20 to 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. So wasting food is a triple loss, really. And the flip side of that is that if you can find ways to address it, it's a triple win. And so that's what we're really focusing on today. So when you waste food, you waste resources. And the one I want to call out, let me go back. These 2 infographics I'm going to show you are from this report from the Natural Resources Defense Council, Wasted, which they wrote in 2012 and updated in 2017. So this, I just want to point out one here. This is one of my favorite infographics. 19% of all US cropland is wasted because of the food we waste in this country. And we just recently at a network cafe talked about protecting farmland and the importance of farmland in the country and in the state. So that one really stood out to me. And food waste is happening across the whole supply chain. So starting with farms, in processing, manufacturing, in grocery stores, restaurants, food service, and this largest chunk you'll see here, this 43% is in households. So food waste is being created from farm to through household use, through all the ways that we process and consume food as a society. And then lastly, when I think about food waste, the way that I find it's helpful to think about addressing food waste is with the EPA's food recovery hierarchy. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this. So it's a hierarchy showing the most preferred way to deal with food waste at the top here, going down to the least preferred way to deal with food waste. So landfilling or incinerating food waste is the last thing we want to do. Most people think of composting as sort of the end all be all, I think, and it's much better than landfilling, but it's only one step up here in the hierarchy. There are lots of other ways to prevent the wasting of food, like getting excess food to people in need in our community, or preventing food from being wasted in the first place or being created where it's not needed. So today, I'm really excited to bring this conversation to New Hampshire, and we have 3 waste warriors with us here that we were so excited to learn, Colleen and I were to learn about the Solid Waste Working Group. And so we invited these to Representative Karen Ebel, Representative Megan Murray, and Paige Wilson with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services here today. And as Colleen said, they're going to give us an overview of what the New Hampshire Solid Waste Working Group is, what the group has done and plans to do, and then some orientation to legislation that's right now being worked on to make some change and reduce food going to waste in New Hampshire. And just so you know, we're going to circle back to the food recovery hierarchy at the end of these comments from our three speakers as a framing for our breakout sessions. All right, Representative Ebel, are you ready?
I am. Well, thank you ever so much for that fabulous introduction and for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited to do some outreach on this really important issue. There's a lot of really good work being done in our state, but as a state, from a legislative standpoint, we haven't been doing so well, and it's really important to mesh all these groups together so we can try to move the state forward. I just as a kickoff, I wanted to set the stage. Back in 2019, you may recall China issued its national sword policy, and they decided they weren't going to be taking a lot of our recyclables anymore. And a lot of our municipalities and businesses were really struggling to try to figure out, they wanted to keep recycling. They didn't know what to do with their stuff. Their costs were increasing, property taxes. And so what I did was I introduced a bill to create a legislative study committee to do a deep dive into this. And Representative Murray was with me at that point on the study group. And you have a link there to our final report. We did a whirlwind tour in about 6 weeks of trying to bring in as many stakeholders as we could to talk with them. What we discovered was that New Hampshire basically hasn't really done a lot on solid waste issues for 20, 25 years, while in our region, the other states are very aggressively pursuing a whole lot of solid waste initiatives, many focused on food waste and other things. So just sort of running through what we identified needed doing in the final report, and what we have achieved as a result of that. The first thing is that we updated our disposal reduction goal, which hadn't been updated since like the mid-90s. The goals were supposed to be achieved by 2000. We've updated those, and what we're trying to do is reduce the disposal of municipal, commercial, industrial waste, known in the trade as MSW and CD, by weight, 25% by 2030 and 45% by 2050. We wanted to really beef up again the planning section within the Solid Waste Bureau at DES. Little known fact, a lot of agencies, they operate on random fees and things of that nature, but this Solid Waste Bureau was focused primarily on the taxes that are raised in the state of New Hampshire. We call those general funds, and with revenue decreases and cutbacks, we completely wiped out the planning section within DES. Happy to say that through the efforts that have come out of this 2019 report that we did, the planning section has been reestablished, and there's two folks in it. One of them is Paige. Before we had maybe 10 in the early years, and so when you have a situation like the municipalities and our businesses were in, there was really nobody to support them very well within DES to wrangle with these really challenging solid waste problems. The other thing that we did is we created the Solid Waste Working Group, which I chair, which is partnering with DES in trying to achieve a whole bunch of goals that are embodied in our new solid waste management plan. Our solid waste management plan is supposed to be done, at that time, it was every 6 years. It hadn't been done since 2003. So you can just imagine how far behind our state was. So the Solid Waste Working Group was created to partner with DES to help advise them on the creation of the plan, and then to help them moving ahead on the implementation of the plan. So the plan has been issued, the working group has been issued, our diversion goals have been reset. And one of the key things that we also wanted to accomplish is to update the composting regulations in the state, which had really in place some thresholds for people who wanted to do innovative things like community gathering of food scraps, that sort of thing. They were supposed to have been updated since 2015. They hadn't been, and one of the huge reasons was, as I said, we didn't have a planning department, and the agency had pretty much been underfunded. So the other thing that we did is we established a solid waste management fund. If I may say, in classic New Hampshire style, we created the fund. It is to date unfunded. And one of my initiatives this year is to try to get some money appropriated to create a matching grant program for businesses and for municipalities. And I'll talk about that legislation a little bit more later. Next slide, please. I have the next slide. Yep. Whoops, sorry, go back one. So just talking about the solid waste working group, it really emerged as part of the 2019 study that there should be some sort of stakeholder group to work closely with DES and trying to advance all the many goals that we had. And there are members from the public and private sectors. We have small towns, big towns, NRRA, if you're familiar with them, a designee from UNH, James Malley, a professor who specializes in these issues. And the group has really worked well together to zero in on different issues that are presented by challenges for different stakeholders. Next slide, please. So you previously saw the food recovery hierarchy. I just want to spotlight the waste management hierarchy in the state of New Hampshire, which the food recovery hierarchy is part of. It's a little bit different, but basically you can see that landfilling is absolutely the bottommost rung. In talking about goals with the working group and then with DES and what's carried through in the plan, we want to focus on source reduction. We also want to really zero in on food waste. And I'll talk about the legislation that I've introduced that basically puts into place in a food waste diversion plan the food recovery hierarchy. Unfortunately, in New Hampshire, we are landfilling a vast quantity of the solid waste that we generate. And I just want to highlight the fact that in our other regional states, they're really trying to decrease the amount that goes into our landfills. And what has happened in the state of New Hampshire, we have several landfills, 3 of them private, about half of the 2 million tons. Paige, you can correct me if I'm wrong on my numbers, but about half of the 2 million tons of landfill waste in the state, half of it comes from out of state. We're not able to block that under the Interstate Commerce Clause, but I think what we should be doing is to be looking more at what we can do within our state and in our state laws to decrease what we are allowed to landfill and thereby perhaps become less attractive to other places who are bringing their trash there, bringing their trash here. Their landfilling and tipping costs are much higher in the other states. And, we want to be more in the state than be welcoming for landfilled waste. Next slide, please. So now, one of the major goals is source reduction in our solid waste plan. And Paige will focus more on the plan itself. I want to talk about the bill that I introduced. And I just want to say again that the legislation that comes out from the state side is just really, really important to moving the state forward on doing better with our solid waste, protecting our environment, helping to feed the hungry. It just covers so many different issues. So House Bill 300, what the Solid Waste Working Group did as a way of really promoting solid waste diversion and trying to achieve our weight reduction goals, we're really targeting food waste. Has been noted before, I think about 25% in weight of the waste that's going into our landfills is food waste. So if you focus on wanting to feed the hungry and preserve landfill, decrease, just overall waste, food waste is a really, really good place to start. So what we did was we looked at what other states are doing, how they started this process. And what they did first was they targeted the large generators of food waste. So what we did was we identified we're targeting food waste generators of 1 ton or more a week. And then they only have to divert their food waste if there's infrastructure to receive that food waste within a 20-mile radius. I did try for a 50-mile radius, but in going through the legislative process so far, it's been reduced to 20. That's where a lot of our other states started. This is sort of a carrot and a stick idea. The stick, if you want to call it that, is to get people to do something better with their food waste. The carrot to businesses is to start developing an infrastructure to receive that food waste. I'm really happy to report that the first committee in the very multifaceted step here, Environment and Agriculture Committee that Representative Murray sits on, recommended passage of this bill 20-0. It's going to go to the House floor. Thus far, it's had no real opposition. I'm going to pound on wood and cross my toes that it stays that way. But I would encourage you all to focus in on the legislative process here and make sure that you let your legislators know that you support this. The vote on the policy piece of this is going to be on the 14th. That's Valentine's Day. If it passes the House, then it's going to go to the Finance Committee because it will need probably a staff person within DES to oversee the gearing up of this program. The other one is House Bill 462. This is what I mentioned before. This is a solid waste management fund that we're creating. It really tracks what many, many other states are doing. And within the text of the solid waste management, the solid waste management fund statutory framework, what we're trying to do is focus in on food waste diversion as a prioritization for the grant making. So like 50% of the prioritized money would be going to food waste diversion. That's House Bill 462. That's also going to get voted on from a policy standpoint on the 14th, and praying that both of those go through and then we get it to finance. And particularly with respect to House Bill 462, I'm requesting a $2 million appropriation as a starter. It's going to be really, really important to get people in there and asking to get that appropriation because there are many competing needs. I just want to say a really quick note about House Bill 300. We're trying to, and
this is me signaling you that we have to move on soon. Though,
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige.
Oh,
again.
Sorry.
I work for DES and just going to provide a really broad overview of our state's solid waste plan and how it relates to this discussion today, and just how highlight some resources that align with our efforts in the state. So the solid waste working group did help advise DES for developing the state's plan, which is a 10-year framework for everyone in the state who interacts with solid waste. There are 8 goals and 76 actions that most are intended to help us reach our statutory goal that Representative Ebel had mentioned. But for this discussion around food waste, there are goals to reduce the quantity that we're generating, maximizing diversion from disposal in landfills and incinerators, and then helping to build and ensure capacity for the waste that we do have generated. And lastly, hoping to develop local markets for diversion. Next slide. So some of the actions I wanted to call out specifically for this discussion is the first is what we're doing right now is talking about the EPA hierarchy. And then I'll share some fact sheets from the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic about food rescue and trying to promote donation, helping to educate about date labels, as well as feeding food scraps to animals. We're hoping to coordinate with the Department of Health and Human Services to help with updating and evaluating any food safety regulations that might be able to encourage more food recovery. We're looking to increase composting in the state by providing technical assistance, helping with outreach, and helping to conduct waste audits in schools, businesses, different facilities to help identify opportunities for diversion. Next slide. Another action involves exploring legislation like HB 300 for implementing a disposal ban for food waste, which could spark alternate technologies and processing facilities such as anaerobic digesters and composting facilities that would help with more preferable management methods in New Hampshire's hierarchy. The last action is just to compile information for the public to be aware of diversion outlets locally in their community. Next slide. So the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic has issued a series of fact sheets for many states across New England. The ones linked here are specific to New Hampshire. One covers the liability protections under the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. So people donating food and products to nonprofits and individuals are covered by this act as long as the donations are made by good faith. There are also federal tax incentives in place. New Hampshire doesn't offer any additional tax incentives for businesses that donate food, but still good to know that it's an option. For date labels, there are no federal laws on date labels, so it's largely left up to the states to regulate. In New Hampshire, there are only regulations for date labels on pre-wrapped sandwiches where they can't be sold after their sell-by date, but largely date labels are set by manufacturers in relation to food quality and not necessarily food safety. And lastly, there are rules in New Hampshire for feeding meat and animal products to swine or like pigs and hogs. There is a permit required to do so, to feed animal waste to swine, but households that feed their waste to pigs raised at their home are exempt from needing a permit. And there's also no restrictions for feeding vegetable scraps. So next slide, running through this. So DES did update our composting facility requirements last March. And with the intent to make composting more accessible for folks and to address limitations of the previous rule. For example, meat and dairy composting is allowed now, whether you have a permit or you are working under a permit exemption. And just highlighting some of those exemptions below, but in the interest of time, I won't dive too much into them, but the facility rules do outline exemptions as well as permitting and siting and facility operations. So happy to have a conversation with folks in the breakout rooms or afterwards if people have questions. So I will lead it off to Megan Murray.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah, next slide. In thinking about since 2019, when Representative Ebel and I set out on this study committee and we started looking forward at what we could really do, some of the things that I had worked on were in helping to address that food waste hierarchy. And one of the pieces of legislation I worked on at that time was HB 500, which was relative to childhood hunger and food waste, which was enabling legislation that was signed into law by the governor, and it allowed school communities to act on their own or with a nonprofit to take leftover food that still comports with HACCP food safety protocols and any of those other food requirements, to then take it and either freeze it or portion it into go meals. And we're seeing some of those initiatives now getting put into action several years later, and it's really exciting. One such place putting that into action is Great Bay Community College, and you'll hear more later from Brittany Mulcahy, the Director of Student Life at Great Bay Community College, who oversees that partnership there to reduce food insecurity. In a few moments, you'll be able to hear more about her incredible work there, and she'll tell us a little bit more about how their program works within their community and how their partnerships are formed. So that was just one step sort of in that direction. Next slide. And locally in my own community, we are now seeing some of these other initiatives step forward as well. In the town of Amherst, which is one of the two towns I represent, New Hampshire, Amherst has really stepped up into leading our community into the better understanding of what to do with food waste. Eric Slosik, who's the head of our DPW partner, Department of Public Works, partnered with AgriCycle to stand up a program where folks can bring harder to compost things like meat and bones and other things too. If they choose not to have an at-home composting program, they can bring it there to the transfer station to then be taken to a larger offsite facility. And then we in Amherst are part of a regional landfill district, and we're working with other local communities to talk about educating folks on composting at home and diverting that solid waste away from incineration or landfills. And just of note, on Monday the 27th in Amherst, for those of you who might be interested, the Amherst Public Library is doing a conversation around composting and trying to get sort of a larger understanding of how it interrelates with home gardening initiatives and other things like that. So really, when we're looking at the policy that we're working on at the state level, it then translates to things you all can do in your own communities. And that's really what I wanted to highlight there, is the ways in which when these things are enacted, what you then can do with it. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you all very much. That was a lot of information, and you miraculously ended on time. So why don't we're going to transition into breakout rooms in just a couple of minutes. We have one question in the chat. I just want to make sure we have the right answer from Representative Bixby asked, re HB 300, does this prohibition apply to out-of-state generators also? Does anyone want to answer that while I transition to what I need to show?
I saw that the DES solid waste person answered it, that it's supposed to apply to in-state generators, and that is correct.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to just show you quickly a little bit about Miro, a tool we're going to use in the breakout rooms. So I'm gonna, let's see. You can access this link in the agenda, or Colleen, I'm sure, will put it in the chat for me. I linked to it from the agenda. It brought me right here. The link should work for all of you without any login or anything like that. And the best thing you can do for yourself is go up here to show collaborators cursors and make sure that it does not, that it says show, not hide. So if I show everyone, it gets very overwhelming, but if you click it and they go away, it's handleable. So Miro is a simple, almost like an online whiteboard. You can zoom in and out, and we put a copy of the food recovery hierarchy here. And what we're asking you to do in breakout rooms, there'll be a sort of a person to lightly facilitate each breakout room, and someone who will launch the discussion with an example of their own of a program or initiative happening around waste reduction in New Hampshire. And then what we're hoping you'll do is help each other to pull down these note cards, these little Post-its, put them near, if they apply to one of the levels of the hierarchy, put them there. If they don't, put it wherever you want. Oops, someone's moving the hierarchy around. I'll fix it. And then you just type in some text there. You can put links. If you struggle with using Miro, you can just ask someone else to help you or put it in the chat, and Colleen and I will comb through later and try to add other programs or thoughts in. Any questions before we break you out into breakouts? No, okay, so I don't even need to show you a better example. You could pull it down, you could put gather in this Post-it, zoom in. There's a shout out to gather. And I already see, oh great, a lot of good examples here. Okay, Colleen, we're ready to go into breakouts.
All right, I'm going to open breakout rooms. Anyone who is a facilitator or a feature participant, stay in the main room and I will send you out accordingly. But everyone else, head out to your breakout rooms and start using this Miro board and sharing all your good ideas. All right, welcome back. Those who are zooming back to our main room here. Getting everybody back in 10 seconds. Have some time for some questions, some final thoughts, some group harvests on what we talked about. All right, everyone's back. All right. That board looked really busy. I was watching everyone buzz around. That's really exciting to see. Yes, I apologize if people got cut off. I hope that you all continue your conversations outside of this space, because as we know, this is a big issue, a big topic, and there's a lot to discuss. Let's definitely start putting things in the chat. If you want to share something that you learned today, something that you're taking away. We also have a little bit of time for folks from their groups to share some takeaways from their groups or some really exciting ideas that bubble to the top, or maybe, some thoughts about collaborations and things that they want to instill in their communities. So folks can raise their hands or come off mute and are welcome to share.
I'm on mute. I just put the evaluation in the chat. We have just a super quick 3-question evaluation for how these cafes are going to help us gauge. So if you could just click that link, it's so fast. We would really appreciate it.
Yes, please do that. And
I see Paul raising his hand there.
Where's Paul?
Yeah, so I just want to give a heads up so that virtual Zoom that we're doing with the Amherst Public Library in February 27th. I'm going to send you a link. Hopefully you can click on that. Actually, I put that together with the scan code that takes you right to where to sign up for it. And in my talk with Nicole, what I said was, no question, there are so many things going on around us. And I would, even though we should be coming together collectively as a unit, we talked about things like what Rhode Island is doing. They're using Basecamp. Nicole talked about another platform that they're going to be testing out. But the goals moving forward, in terms of moving forward, it's going to be really important to have like these platforms like a Basecamp where you can go and all of the stakeholders, teachers, politicians, business people, municipality, DPW directors, they can all live there and they can start to work together in unison. And that's what, so I joined the Basecamp in Rhode Island, and that is what I am seeing. So we're like here, Rhode Island is here. And then I actually work with Sweden a little bit, and they're way out here, right? They actually banned landfills in 2005, and their food waste, their waste stream total is down to 1%.
Wow.
And it's
Thanks,
incredible.
That
Incredible. So all I would say is just consolidate.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some questions in the chat too. I urge you all, if you have questions for some of our presenters as well, they're here to answer anything, or at least do their best to answer things. Let's see, there was a question in
Nancy has one.
Yep. Can anyone point me towards a workaround for animals who are attracted to compost? I'm hearing about this from local people. That's a good one. I defer to Paige. She's our compost gal.
Yeah, and I can share some resources after Nancy with you. But basically one of the ways to troubleshoot that is to cover the food scraps and the material that creates more of an odor with the carbon-based material, which is like your dry ingredients, so like leaves and sawdust and shredded wood chips and that kind of thing, to suppress the smell. It really is the odor that attracts animals, and so just trying to reduce that and being aware of like when you're adding it and where the compost pile is located, and whether it's a really windy day and you're turning and it's really drumming up that odor, that really is kind of the best way to manage it, is to reduce the smell. So again, I can send you something after, but that's my quick response, I guess, for how to deal with it.
Awesome.
But there are lots of ways. So
Thanks, Paige. Any other some thoughts that folks had or questions that they wanted to raise? Feel free to unmute, raise your hand.
In our group, we had a question about liability for folks donating food. And so I put into the chat, let's see, where did it go?
I'll grab it, Mary.
Yeah, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, which covers even cleaners. So
Yes.
it's a nice summary on that link. So that'll, I think, answer the questions that might come up.
Great. That's awesome. What a good resource. And I know folks were asking about some of the links from Paige's slide with all of those one pagers about donating food and being protected by the Good Samaritan Act. We will share all those as a follow-up to this cafe. So you'll get those in a tidy little email. All right. Other things people want to share, just shout out to.
Oh, I just real quick, and Paige,
Yeah.
speak up if you want to. I gave a plug for your composting camp, your composting at camp sites booklet or PDF. I don't know if you want to share that or just anyway.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I actually mentioned it too in the breakout session I led, but yeah, I can send that hopefully before in the next 2 minutes before this ends, but it's basically just a best management practice guide for camps that can also be adapted for schools. And I mean, really any type of audience, it's a lot of the same information, but that guide is specifically focused on a camp situation. But I will share that. Thanks, Lisa.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, definitely we'll share all of that. Talking a lot about Sweden. Interesting. That's some interesting stuff. Very good. Well, we probably have time for one more question or reaction or thought, and then we'll really wrap up and let you all get back to your lunch. Anything bubbling up for anybody?
Well, I just want to mention in my town, we don't have a pickup of recycling, but we have a recycling center people can bring their stuff to. And I notice a lot of people might not even realize you have it in your town. What I cut to the chase, let people know, write things in your local newsletters, on your Facebook pages to let people know what's going on. Because they're here. There's a lot of stuff I learned about that I didn't know was going on. So the same thing happens on a smaller level right in your town. If you have like recycling, tell people about it, let them know how to do it. Assume that they want to do it, but they don't know where or how.
Right. That's awesome. What a good way to end, because that's what we want to focus on with a lot of this work is community-based solutions. So we can all play a part in that. And I think that's a really exciting way to end a good conversation today. Nicole has put that evaluation for this cafe in the chat. We'd love if you take it, just probably 30 seconds, not even to take that evaluation. And we will let you all go. Our next topic is going to be around on-farm energy and efficiencies for farms in terms of energy. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you all soon.
Stay warm, everyone. Thanks for coming.
being here.
And thank you to our
presenters.
Waste Warrior speakers.
Yes.
That was wonderful.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.